Welcome to Calmly Coping. I am here with Nikki Eisenhauer today. She is an international life coach and psychotherapist, licensed professional counselor, yoga and meditation teacher, as well as a podcaster. And I'm super excited because we're going to be talking about a few interesting topics, including being an empath and highly sensitive person, as well as struggling with trauma. So if you can resonate with any of this, I think you will find this episode helpful. I'm super excited to have you here, Nikki.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. I'm excited to chat.
Yes, absolutely. So, one thing stood out to me when I was looking through your website and your bio, and you had used the term guerrilla self care. So, I'm really curious about that. What do you mean by that?
I mean that I think we have to really go after our self-care. Like it's not like a side idea. It's not something that we're sort of doing in the background, that we have to really go after it. That as a highly sensitive person and an empath, when I look back at my life, from the moment I was born, I almost died. So my little nervous system has been overactivated and anxious really all of my life. And what that has required for me to cultivate a sense of calm, because my body just didn't know how to do calm, just couldn't do it, didn't know how, didn't have it modeled, didn't know how to grab it. So it has been sort of, like we say, guerrilla warfare. It's like that kind of like nitty gritty, like get in there of just, you just got to lean in and you have to do sort of the heavy lifting of self-care and do it in an unapologetic way. I think I felt really sheepish and had a lot of judgment in my youth, like in my 20s, even though I was learning how to be a counselor and trying to move through my own emotional process. It's like, why should I have to do all this self-care? Other people don't have to do that and they seem fine. Like, why should I have to do this? Being really angry that these were the things that I needed to do. They cost extra money, they take extra time, they take extra energy, and being really pissy and angry and resentful about having to do that, comparing to other people. So part of that sort of guerrilla self-care to me is a radical acceptance of who I really am, instead of trying to be someone that I'm not, trying to move through life in a way that I'm just not wired. I kind of make the joke that some people seem to be born with what I would call like a natural stoner temperament. Like they are just cool as a fan. I'm from New Orleans, so that's what we say. People are cool as a fan. And I really expected myself to be able to be that, and felt like something was wrong with me because I couldn't just wake up and be that sort of natural stoner, like surfer, chill vibe. But once I radically accepted, okay, I'm not naturally that. I'm an intense person. I am a deep feeler. If I start actually working with that instead of fighting that, then I actually get to heal myself. I actually get to step into sort of the light of my life, as corny as that might sound. So that's kind of where that term comes from for me.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love how you describe that. So it sounds like it's really that self acceptance of where you are and the fact that maybe you do require a lot of self-care. I'm sure that a lot of my listeners can identify with this as well, struggling with anxiety, where sometimes there's certain things you have to do in order to just care for yourself, that you might feel like, all right, well, how come most people don't have to do these things? Or there's something wrong with me, like you had mentioned. So I'm hearing it's really that concept of self-acceptance in order to heal.
Yeah. And in that self-acceptance is letting go of the fight. The fight. I shouldn't have to. I don't want to. This is time. This is money. It's, if I could go back in time and talk to my younger self, and I think a lot of therapists, we both have a therapy background, fall into this category of just sort of holding space for the upset and holding more space for the upset and more space for the upset. Well, if you want to get out of the upset, at some point you have to kind of look at it and go, all right, I'm going to stop swarming around this upset. I don't like having this. Why do I have anxiety? And just accept that you do. And in that acceptance, you're not wasting your precious energy fighting that reality. Then you can actually use your energy to soothe yourself, to heal yourself, or to use your energy for the courage it takes to not allow anxiety to make your life decisions. That's a
Yeah.
big one for me. And I think that that's the cruel trick of anxiety, right? It sort of says, hey, that's scary. That makes us anxious. Avoid it at all costs, until our world is very small. And in this modern age where it's really easy to become agoraphobic, we can have everything delivered to our home. You know, this idea that I'm going to have this life where I'm never made anxious is just backwards. So we have to, in that gorilla kind of way, we have to lean into some of our anxiety and learn the difference between an anxiety that says, ooh, that's intuitively a bad idea, don't walk down that dark road, as safety, versus the kind of anxiety that actually like shuts down our living and our life, because all right, I'm anxious about that, but that's a good one for me to lean into. And that's how we start to transform it. So we start working with that dirty trick that anxiety plays. It says, just avoid all anxiety at all costs.
Mhm.
That's what'll make this better. And it makes it so much worse. So I'm big about, we have to learn how to lean in and use our energy for the courage it takes to lean in and past that immediate anxious response and resistance in so many
Mhm.
of us.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. And I think, you identify that distinction, which I think comes up a lot for people between what is the anxiety that is something that is important to avoid because it's dangerous, because it's your intuition telling you so, versus what is the anxiety that is maybe something that's exaggerated by your mind. It's that automatic response, and you're kind of assuming the worst. How would you suggest that people, like if they're having trouble distinguishing one from the other, they start to identify that difference?
I think that comes down to heart knowledge for me, that we can't just think things through. We have to actually do the doing of the things that we're thinking about. So my first tip there is meditation. And I think sensitive people often kind of roll their eyes. It's like, oh yeah, another health coach talking about meditating. And if you were sitting right in front of me, listener, I'd go, all right, are you meditating? Or are you thinking about meditating? Do you listen to people like me talk about meditating and go, oh yeah, meditating is a great idea? As long as these things stay an idea, we're not practicing anything new. And so meditation isn't necessarily about get everything out of your mind, man, and just mellow out like that natural stoner. It's actually about training the mind muscle. And if your mind muscle leans anxious, what was that noise? What's that? Is that person out to get me? Oh, that's going to scare me. I'm going to be embarrassed. We have to sort of give it some counterweight. And meditation is what strengthens the mind muscle in a focusing kind of way, in a grounded kind of way. So for highly sensitive people and empaths, I'm a very strong empath. I've had to learn that my power is in slowing down. I can't really manage my anxiety or keep it from getting out of control if I'm frantic, if I'm sort of running around up here in the cloudy storm of my thoughts.
Mhm.
Meditation is really this invitation to get into the body, to root down through our feet, and to sort of be right where we are. And if we can't slow down like that, we can't distinguish the difference between an anxious thought and an intuitive warning in our gut. And in working, my specialty is highly sensitive people, childhood trauma survivors, and addiction. And so those are and grief, those are my specialties. And so when we really look at that, highly sensitive people since childhood, if they grew up in chaos, they've never learned how to be still. So how do you really listen to your intuition and start the understanding of discerning the difference if you can't slow down? So meditating is a very big part of that. And that doesn't have to be like oming and incense and like creating the perfect moment. And that's why a lot of highly sensitive people resist meditating for years, because they're perfectionists, are perfectionists. I have one too. I say it's a sneaky bastard. It shows up in places like, I'm just going to be resistant to meditating. Why? Why would any of us be resistant to sitting for 5 minutes and breathing and being still in this hectic, crazy modern life that we're all living through? Why would we have any resistance to that? It's because the perfectionist goes, you don't know how to do that, right? You don't have the right stuff. Look at this room. This isn't a meditation room. I need the right cushion. I need the right incense. I need the right this. What do I do with my hands? Like, our perfectionist is a real sneaky bastard. And it gives us so much resistance to just simplifying. And when we can grab that monkey mind and go, you know what? Stop with all your chatter and all your resistance. Just sit your booty down, close your eyes and breathe for a few minutes. That's it. That's it. we're working through that resistance really wants us to stay the same. It's scared of change. So if we've been anxious kind of forever, as much as our conscious mind might know, well, it's better for me to get out of that anxiety and practice new things. We all know that. But that resistant energy, that's part of what we lean into. Do you see how resistance really is anxiety? So anxiety is the biggest sneaky bastard of them all. It shows up in all these smart ways. It wants to convince us that it's smart to listen to anxiety. When we start to really discern the difference between intuition and our gut and the swarm of thoughts in our head, we start pulling that apart. At first, it just seems like one big like dumping of sensory information, and we really don't know. It's just like a big closet that's messy that we've been just shoving stuff into it for years and slamming the door. All of a sudden we go, okay, I'm gonna organize this closet today. Where's the trash and where's the good stuff? And it just kind of tumbles out. And it just looks like a big old messy pile. It's the same with our emotional stuff. And we have to be willing and committed to going, all right, there has been a messy closet quality to my relationship with myself. The things I haven't known how to deal with, I've just shoved in that closet, kept being how I've been being, kept doing what I've been doing. So we have to be patient and still to sort through. And it's as we're sorting through that closet, we start to feel better. At a point we're like, oh no, why did I open this up? I should have just left it closed. Too much, too messy. But there's a point at which we start to get a handle on it, and we have a pile of things we want to save, and a pile of things we want to donate, and a pile of trash. And it starts to feel better. We start to make sense of it. And then each new little bit, we go, oh no, I know this is trash, or I know this is valuable and I want to keep it. And that's how it works with our emotional self too. But we have to be willing to sort that messy closet, and we have to be willing to look at it and not pull back right at that moment where we go, uh-oh, why did I let all this stuff out? I'm going to drown in the mess of this. And we have to show up and go, no, we aren't. Breathe, find that stillness, one little thing at a time. And that's how we start to hone in on, ooh, maybe that's an intuitive read instead of an anxious thought. And we have to give ourselves permission to make so many mistakes to be able to find that discernment.
Yeah, I love that comparison to the messy closet, because I think it's something easy for people to visualize. And I can see that when you first go into meditation, it's like you're confronted with all of this stuff that maybe you've been avoiding. And it's uncomfortable and it's a lot to manage. And I've thought of it before when I meditate that like many times the first few minutes, it's like kind of skimming the top layer of algae off of a pond. It's like all of this stuff is going to come up, and then till you get to kind of the layer underneath of like the stillness, I suppose.
Yes. I'm a foodie from New Orleans. So when you said skimming, I thought off the top of the gravy, like you got to skim the fat off the gravy to get to the good, flavorful stuff. And it's like, yeah, that's what we're learning how to do just with our emotions. And it's really not rocket science. Like when I went to graduate school, I don't know about you, but I was really pissed off, really angry, because the emotional education that I was receiving, I thought this is wrong, that I have to be at a master's level in college to get this stuff, because it's not rocket science. It's just that we go an entire development with very few people being emotionally intelligent and emotionally mature around us. So most of what is modeled for us is very reactive, very small-minded, very in denial of our emotional selves. And we're learning as highly sensitive empaths how to actually nurture ourselves and grow. I'm big on inner child work, because in my life, the adults around me did not know how to give the child that I was what she needed. I was smart, I was curious, I had a lot of questions, I was insightful. I felt when the adults' energy around me was off and wrong, for lack of a better way to say that. My parents had a very nasty, very childish divorce. They both talked crap about each other to the children. And feeling that, of course, I learned how to have maximum anxiety in my body. That was energy I shouldn't have had to carry. That was the responsibility of the adults around me that didn't have the maturity to hold that boundary line. So it got dumped on me. And as little sensitive empaths, we are the sponges. So really we have sponged up the irresponsibility of lots of our childhood caretakers. So that guerrilla self-care is radically becoming the adult that we always need. I have lots of conversations, as woo-woo as that might sound to some people, with my inner child, which is just my inner psyche. So when I feel scared to do something brave, I feel a wave of anxiety. I have to kind of tap into what I call my wise woman and have her reach down and grab the metaphorical little hand of my inner child and go, hey, sweet girl, grown up me is right here. I've got you. It's okay for us to do this. We're going to do this because this is good for us. And it's scary and you can do it anyway. And actually be the cheerleader that we all deserved. Actually be the grown up that encourages. When I wanted to become a counselor in Southern Louisiana almost 20 years ago, the feedback I got, and I go, I think I'm going to be a counselor, was why? Why would you do that? Why would you want to listen to people cry all day? And it just shut me down and flustered me. I didn't know quite how to answer it. I felt a real intuitive calling to this field. And now I know the tears are beautiful. It's release. It's joy. I don't have to be scared of that emotion. And that's what my wise woman does for my inner child. She's like, hey, sweetie, whatever you're feeling right now, it's okay to feel. But let's feel it and let's shift. It's part of why, I'm not sure about you, but it's part of why I shifted to calling myself more of a coach than a counselor, because I do believe mental health is getting stuck with clients very often, just swirling around kind of the suck instead of going, okay, let's be in the suck for a couple moments. And then that's enough suck. Let's shift and get out of it. And our egos want to wallow in that emotion. And especially with anxiety, it's like, but I'm anxious. Yep. And let's use a different word. Let's let that go. Let's drop that. Let's move forward. We have to really become our own encouragers, and we have to face a lot in this world with a lot of courage. So how do we do that if we didn't get that kind of encouragement from our parents? We become it for that scared part of ourselves.
Yeah, I like how you put it as your wise woman speaking to that inner child. And I definitely agree that, so many people, and I found this shocking as well, just to reflect upon once I had this knowledge of just emotional awareness and how it's just not talked about, something we're not educated upon. And in fact, it's the opposite that I think is passed down generationally, that, it's weak, or it's you're too vulnerable, or you're too sensitive if you're expressing or talking about your emotions. And of course, I'm sure that's especially more relevant for somebody who is a highly sensitive person.
I think that is what the world thinks about emotion, because the world in general, our society, doesn't know how to deal with it. The truth is, the reason that we have confusion about our intuition and our anxiety is because as little kids, if we grew up in dysfunctional homes, I knew that my mother was a sociopath on some level. Didn't have the language. Couldn't have described that to somebody, because like, she cooked dinner every night. She brushed my hair. She was rough. She hurt me. She jerked me around, but she sure made my hair look pretty as a little girl. I was always dressed nice. I was always clean. These box checking things that make for a good family. Well, my intuition knew something is off about my mother. My intuition would go, warning, warning. She wasn't warm, very big ice queen type of person. So I didn't have a soft place to fall. Well, when your intuition feels that and senses that, something's wrong here, something's not right. You can't get in a car and drive away. You can't go to the mom store and go pick up a different mom and come back with a better model that suits what you need. Okay. So we have no choice but to leave our intuition and run to our head and create stories. Maybe she's just having a bad day. Well, maybe this. Well, maybe I'm just bad. And this is where our core beliefs grow. I felt like I was worthless for a very long time in my life, like I wasn't important. Well, an ice queen type of mother doesn't have the stuff to make a child feel important in the world. Okay. So the more that we lean into this work about growing into becoming the mother and the father that we actually needed and deserved, the more our nervous system and our entire emotional system can sort of slow down, ground, and calibrate. And we get a better distinction. As an adult, I can trust my intuition. When my intuition goes off, I'm not beholden because I'm a child. I saw recently someone say, let's see if I can get it right, that A child makes excuses, an adult makes changes.
Mm.
So when we are in our inner child and we go, but I don't want to do that, I'm anxious. That really is the inner child. We can hear it. It sounds childish, right? And we have to learn how to not use childish as some kind of judgment. We were children for our development. That's not a dirty word. It's not an insult. If we learn to distinguish and go, okay, that's the childish part of me. How else is she going to process other than that's scary? I don't want to do it. I tap into that wise woman self and go, oh, sweet girl. It's okay. You have me. Grown up me decided this is a good thing. We're going to do it. We're going to lean in. You can be scared and resistant, and you can do it anyway. And that's how we start to move our lives forward. And that's how we grow into confidence. Sensitive people want to be confident, and then they want to act. And it will never happen like that.
Mm-hmm.
We have to do the scary thing. And then that gives us confidence when we turn around and go, look at that scary thing that I did. And then we feel proud. So all of this work starts to come together to actually have us acting in self-respect and self-regard. And that's really what healing is to me.
So would you consider this like reparenting?
Totally.
Okay.
Totally. Mhm. And I only don't use that term because someone in the 80s was using that term and people died like being sweaty and some kind of rebirthing kind of process. And that's not what I mean.
Okay.
So this is not about giving your power to somebody else to reparent you. We might have other people step into that role at times. My therapist in my life certainly has been my spiritual mother. Maya Angelou is a spiritual mother to me that I tap into. Okay, so we might be birthed to one mother and one father, but I'm of the spiritual belief that we get to be remothered and refathered by so many different people and so many different elements. It's why Obama, no matter what your politics were, was a really good president for this country. Psychologically, he was a good dad. That we all needed. We could look up to him. We could feel kind of safe with him. We could feel proud. We could trust him to adult. That's why he feels so good to so many people. So we get different little versions, and we can open up and allow these things to reparent us. But if we give our power away and say, well, I just want my therapist to reparent me because I wasn't parented very well, we're giving our power away. So there's a balance there in letting those energies of the universe, if you will, come in and be used in such a way. But we want to take that in a way that is teaching me how to reparent myself. Because that's how we've learned as human beings since the beginning of time, through story. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to have my podcast, because we learn through story. We learn through the experience of other people. It's one of the most basic human things. It's part of my struggle with strict boundaries in clinical counseling. It's unnatural to be a trauma survivor that was sexually abused or beaten or betrayed by a human being in the tribe. And then I'm just supposed to go to somebody that went to school that has letters behind their name, and I'm supposed to be 100% vulnerable with this person. That's not a reasonable ask. That's not healthy. It's not safe. So being able to get a sense of your therapist and who that person is, that's how actual real trust develops. Not by just saying, I went to school, you can trust me. It's the same with things like priests. You don't just go to was raised Catholic. You don't go, well, you're a priest, therefore you're safe. It's a problem we have in society. So we need to really be able to connect with people and practice that discernment versus anxiety, discernment of the gut, the intuitive response as we're getting to know people, as we're letting them in as our healers to teach us how to reparent ourselves, but absolutely a reparenting.
Yeah, so I'm hearing that building of the relationship is an important part to begin that healing, whether it's a relationship with yourself, with others, potentially both.
Absolutely. And I would say that with a right fit therapist, love is part of it. And that's very scary for people that are trained clinically. And I teach boundaries. I teach a boundaries course every October. This is going to be the 7th year that I'm teaching it. I teach live in it for almost a full 6 weeks. Part of having healthy boundaries is so that we know where those lines are, so that we understand when we're crossing them. It's not about never crossing boundary lines. Okay, so I think those boundaries with trauma therapists are too strong. There are certain populations, if people are delusional, if they're psychotic, that need really strict, strong boundaries. But for a highly sensitive person, that most of their trauma is a betrayal by other human beings, whether those other human beings were toxic or trying their damnedest and they were just inadequate, we feel a betrayal. So how do we heal that? Through connection with other humans. We didn't get hurt in some bubble without other humans. We don't heal without other humans too. We are born to be social creatures. My therapist at one point said, Nikki, I love you. And I remember being in graduate school thinking, you're not supposed to, you're not supposed, but I felt it from her. Many, many, many years later, at least a decade later, I was teaching other therapists about high sensitivity. And I talked about my therapist, Lisa, saying at one point that she loved me and how much of a struggle that was, because I trusted it and felt it to be true, but thought, I'm paying her. This is sticky and this isn't right. And the truth is, I didn't get it in my family of origin. So yeah, I needed to walk the world and pay for it. If it was a couple hundred years ago, I would have given her chickens or goat milk, or it's just an exchange. And that exchange doesn't mean that loving care isn't real. Mm. Now, I can't advertise and say, I will love you, come pay me and have sessions with me and I will love you. I would warn anybody about going towards a professional that advertises that. But as I was teaching those other professionals, I was saying how much of a turning point that was for me, that I had to realize I was actually lovable, that beyond me paying this person, she loved me, beyond that exchange. And what I've realized in my own work is that I love all of my clients. It's not the same love that I have for my husband, but it is a human love. It is I get to see deep inside of you and I like what I see. And the truth is, I really can't work with somebody more than a couple sessions if there isn't some quality of them to love. And the more I've learned to love myself, the more loving with ease it is to love some aspect of other people in the human tribe. And that's also part of how we soothe our nervous system, is being in more loving acceptance of ourselves and of other people. When I was in that workshop telling that story, a lady came up to me and she said, I was your therapist and mentor. I once told her that I loved her. So it was like,
Oh, wow.
It was like a spiritual grandmother moment of passing down love and care. And as professionals in mental health field, I think that's what we're doing for each other and our clients, is realizing that if we're going to heal the human condition and our people, loving people appropriately, not just when they have great behavior and good behavior, but actually loving people when they have bad behavior, is a very important part of this process. Sometimes my clients that I have a very strong bond with, sometimes their inner adolescent comes out. If we're doing reparenting, we all have an inner adolescent part too. And just like in real parenting, that inner adolescent part is not always fun, and so there are times with clients where I go really deep, and a lot of therapists don't want to go there, and that's okay. But if you're going to do trauma work with highly sensitive people and you're really going to do healing work with them, I think you have to go there, or you have to decide that that's not the work that you were put on the planet to do, because that's the work that we need as sensitive people. We need sensitivity modeled for us. We need actual loving care truthfully spoken to us. And if we're feeling that for our clients and we're not acknowledging that or communicating that, I don't know that that's fair or right. In the same aspect, a lot of my parenting growing up was being told different versions of do as I say, not as I do. So if I went to go see a therapist who's like, I am going to be an emotional Teflon pan and you are going to see no emotion coming from me, that's another version of do as I say, not as I do. I'm not going to be intimate with you at all. I'm not going to be vulnerable with you at all, but I would like you to be fully vulnerable. Go. That's not a great ask for someone who's trying to heal betrayal bonds, who's trying to heal betrayal from other people in the tribe. That's not how intimacy and vulnerability are supposed to work. And so the more that I have shared my story publicly, the deeper the work gets. And lots of therapists are asking me about that. How do you handle that? What happens if somebody throws your history in your face? It's just like a teenager throwing something in their mother's face. It's being able to hold that line and go, hey, that's abusive behavior and that's not allowed. You're allowed to be upset with me. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to disagree. You're not allowed to lash out that way. And it's reparenting at that level. And that really is the nitty gritty of what a lot of us need. Anxiety is just the glaring, comfortable thing that we've learned to say and we suffer from kind of constantly as sensitive people. When we peel back those layers, it's more like self-worth. It's more like our parenting was haphazard or just a complete shit show. And we have to kind of figure out, what do I need to wring out of my spongy high sensitivity-ness? What do I want to wring out from my childhood, just like wringing out a sponge? And what do I want to keep with me? Some of what I was taught, like work ethic, very helpful and useful from my family of origin. I want to keep that with me. But there's a lot that I've wanted to wring out.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a really important perspective that you brought up. How, I think it's something that many therapists are taught to be kind of like, you know, from a while back, like that blank slate of not having reactions to the client. And I can absolutely see and understand how that can be harmful, like you said, when somebody hasn't had that trusting relationship or they've experienced betrayal or abuse. And, they're then trying to understand what it's like to have a supportive and healing relationship. And so I think it's so great that you pointed that out. And I know that we've talked about, being a highly sensitive person, being an empath, and I know that those tend to be like buzzwords. And I know it's kind of probably late in the episode, but could you provide kind of like an explanation or a definition of what those terms mean and how somebody might know that they are a highly sensitive person, are an empath? Are they similar? Are they different?
I can definitely do that. And what I will say before we get into that is, yes, it's a buzzword. And anytime anything becomes a buzzword, it's kind of a bummer because it just starts to get watered down. People who are not that thing start to identify as it. And so it gets murky and it gets messier the more popularized something gets. So if you're sensing that, trust what you're sensing there. I see tons of people going, I'm a highly sensitive person. I think, no, you're not. And one part of me goes, I have no right to tell them what their sensitivity is. To them, they may be highly sensitive. But in terms of me working with that population across my career, there are some real markers. And there are a lot of people with narcissistic traits right now that are saying they're highly sensitive. So there's a saying from Al-Anon really that says, turn down the volume, look at the behavior. So just in general, not just on this topic, that's a very good piece of advice to have in our pocket as we are sensitive people navigating our own healing and everybody else's wounds in the world as we interact with people. Is lots of people say really good things. And the more mental health podcasts are out there, the more really dysfunctional people pick up on the buzz language. So turning down the volume and going, how does this person live? How do they move through the world? No matter what they're saying will help you not be sort of mystified by what they're saying, and actually helps you ignore that and look at what they're actually doing. And that will always give you sort of more of a grounded truth about what you're observing or what somebody is presenting. So high sensitivity. Every empath is a highly sensitive person. Not every highly sensitive person is an empath. Okay, so high sensitivity. Think about your sensory system. We have sight, we have sound, we have touch that feels things like temperature or feels your hair on the back of your neck. Our sensory system, we smell. Okay, we are sensoried beings. Okay, science is increasingly proving that we have nervous systems, okay, connected to our brain in our head and our brain in our gut, which science is proving more and more and more that there are neurons in the gut. That's why we have sayings like, trust your gut. What's your gut response? That comes from somewhere, y'all. We didn't just make that up. There's reasons that developed in our human communication to have phrases like that. So for high sensitivity, we have sort of more sensory information coming in than the average person. It's part of why one of the main complaints from a highly sensitive person is, I'm exhausted and I'm overwhelmed. Well, that makes a lot of sense if you start to understand, oh, my nervous system is picking up so much more sensory information. If I walk out onto a balcony or a deck and I'm looking out at the wilderness, okay, if the average nervous system is standing next to me, they're like, hey, this is beautiful. Yeah, I'm a little thirsty. Or they feel the sensation of, I need to go pee, and they go to the bathroom and you kind of call it a day. Me, I'm hearing the birds. I'm seeing how the light plays on the different leaves. I can hear the leaves. I can hear the wind. I'm hearing different birds. I'm hearing different insects. That's beautiful when I am in nature and I don't have any grown-up responsibilities, and I can just be in the sensory experience of that. Okay. We add the hecticness of modern life. No freaking wonder we are so exhausted and overwhelmed. It's part of why most of us identify as introverts. Okay. We think about 70% of highly sensitive people are introverted. Some of y'all are extroverted, and that means you go hang out with people and people actually energize you. For the introvert, we get drained by people. We add high sensitivity to that, and all right, we can start to have some real compassion and understanding of why things wear us out. And again, if I go back to what we said earlier, if you radically accept that you are this highly sensitive person, you can better plan for your life. You know, the wind on my skin is kind of hard for me. I'm working on having more acceptance of wind on my skin as comfortable. It's actually something I'm working on, practicing. But if I'm going to go where it's windy, I need to make sure that I have some kind of windbreaker. So I'm planning for myself to try to keep myself comfortable, you know, instead of just white knuckling it and going, nobody else is going to have 2 jackets at this thing. And so if you think about it through your sensory information, that gives you a lot of information. Mm-hmm. Empaths are sort of like highly sensitive person 2.0. I might use the word intuitive. And that seemed very woo-woo to me coming from a clinical background. So I had to really warm up to being some of those things. But an intuitive sort of has this, or an empath has this gut sense. And some of us have like a knowing. Okay. I tend to have an empathic clairsentience. That would be the fancy woo-woo word for it. That means I tend to have a knowing of what someone is thinking. That doesn't mean I'm psychic, doesn't mean I do psychic readings. It means I can have a sense of what your intention is. I can have a sense of your feeling. I can feel often what you're feeling. Okay. I've had to learn a lot of boundaries. It's part of why I teach boundaries about what to do with that. Most of us get born into the world and we just feel through it and we're exhausted. So we need to have some boundaries to wall that off. So we're not just soaking up all of the feelings of everyone and everything in the universe, because we need to be able to live. Okay. So empaths, sometimes somebody says that they're a medical empath. That means that they might have the sense of an area of somebody else's body where they're having a tumor, some kind of cancer growth, or if they have some kind of lung issue, they may like see a color like around their lungs. We all have different forms of processing the intuitive information. And that's unique to us. And we learn how we're similar and different by hearing other empaths talk about what it feels like to be in this empathic body. I do some of that on my show. The other piece with being an empath is that we do what I've learned from having a highly sensitive milieu of working with people is that we have some similarity in traits. We tend to have really high integrity. And what a beast to wrangle to come from a place of high integrity without it being perfectionism. So that's a spot where I think a lot of us have to really, at some point in our self-development, kind of make a piece or even a formula inside of ourselves to go, when am I in that high integrity? And when is that high integrity so high that it's approaching perfectionism and it's actually shutting down my ability to flow, my productivity? Okay. We tend to be able to see what's coming. Someone put it to me years ago as not psychic, but the gift of prophecy. So we can sense, I say that we can see the dominoes that line up. Okay. And because we are very concerned with our comfort level and not creating scenarios that take more of our energy later, we tend to really see what's coming. In work environments, it's not always appreciated. There's some information that says highly sensitive people might get laid off more than other people. That's a weird thing. Why? We have high integrity. We tend to have high work ethic. If we're going to do something and take it on as work ethic, we're going to give it our all. Why wouldn't that make us lovely employees? Well, we tend to be the squeaky wheels. We want to make things as a tribe. We have in common that we want to make things better. We want to make them run smoothly, which is in respect of we don't want to waste our energy. Our energy is precious. Not all employers go, oh, thank you. Yes, I want to run my business in the most smooth way. A lot of corporate entities, actually the opposite. It's more like, stop telling me that you're a squeaky wheel and what's not working. I'm not very interested in changing. I just want you to kind of shut up and do the work. we tend to feel very hurt in work environments. A lot of us turn entrepreneurial to get outside of working for other people because we've had so many experiences of that being undervalued. And again, all of us are going through this life thinking that we're kind of the only one experiencing that. So it's been a gift of my career that highly sensitive people found me. I didn't intend to work with highly sensitive people. I started going, why do some of these clients of mine have a similar heart? They care about people. Most of my highly sensitive empaths, I'm a child-free woman, yet I have a major passion for child development. We care about what's happening to the children of the world. We don't want people to suffer. We fight for the underdog. We tend to lean codependent because we give away what we most need. We want everybody else to be emotionally taken care of, which really is a sign of us standing in one spot screaming, I need my emotional needs met. So it's okay to be a people pleaser, but you've got to be on that list. You've got to please yourself too. And that helps kind of balance out that propensity to give away to other people. We have to retain some of that giving for ourselves. I have a saying that we need to learn how to be self-ish. I get to be ish about myself. If I'm not going to be ish about myself, who the hell else is going to be ish about me? Like, my life is my job. That's not a dirty secret. That's not obnoxious. That's not narcissistic. Okay. Some of us think that high sensitivity and narcissism run on the same continuum. And that scares highly sensitive people. Most of us have been raised by them. Okay. I have a theory that when we're raised in a family where the adults aren't having personal responsibility, it's like a beach ball. And we just show up and catch that personal responsibility like I did for my parents. So we're learning how to have appropriate responsibility while letting other people actually have the natural consequences of their personal responsibility. So there's a lot that goes into being highly sensitive. The more that you start to learn, the more you will open up to knowing that you're not alone. If you're truly a highly sensitive person, if you're an empath, most of us have been scared. I've said it to my therapist. Most of my clients have said it to me. Nikki, are you sure I'm not a narcissist? Because when I'm angry, wow, I can be biting. I can be sharp. It's like, yeah, if you've been this people pleaser over here, sure, whatever, no boundaries. Yeah, whatever you need. Yes, 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 yes. The pendulum swings the other side. So when you're fed up, then you're like, no, everyone get away from me. I hate all people. And then we go, gosh, am I really a narcissist? Am I really an empathy-less asshole? We all ask ourselves that. No, but if we get our boundaries straight, we'll be more in that middle ground. Okay. We tend to think of narcissism as maybe being a very highly sensitive person. Okay. The empaths stay sort of soft to the world, soft and spongy without enough barrier or boundary. That's why I teach boundaries. The narcissist sort of goes in the full other direction. They may be a very wounded, tender, inadequate feeling person deep down in there, but they have developed this sort of hard outer shell of not caring. And after years and years and years of basically practicing not caring, their empathy shrinks. Like a muscle atrophies if somebody is laid up and can't walk, those muscles atrophy. It's like their empathy muscle apathies. So we do have sort of connection to narcissism. We're just the other side of the spectrum. And some highly sensitive empaths who don't heal absolutely go the way of the narcissist. And the scary thing there is you can't really get that empathy back once it shrinks down to a certain point. Okay, does that answer? Does that lead to more questions?
That answers it. I mean, I think that you really described that really well. And I'm sure that the listeners could, like, were nodding their head, probably in agreement. And I really resonated with what you said about having very high integrity leading to perfectionism, because that is absolutely me. Like, I tend to have very high standards and integrity for other people, for myself. And then if I don't manage that, it definitely goes into the realm of perfectionism.
So the more we learn about these things, the more I think with ease, I think that's another piece when we've felt a lot of tension, we get to feel ease. So if your inner child or mine ever goes, gosh, am I being a narcissist or am I being a workaholic from this high integrity? Tap into that wise woman and reach down and have that conversation with yourself. Like, we would have liked someone to have had some of those conversations at critical moments with us. And that's how we start to negotiate. Negotiation is a big word for me with sensitives and empaths. It's like we have to learn how to really negotiate inside of ourselves with what we need and outside with the world. And those boundaries become really priceless as we form our lives, so that we're not just leaking out our energy and basically bleeding it out until we don't have any left for ourselves or for our families or our lives, especially when we're doing heart-centered work all day. We need to have some boundaries and learn how to not take it on. I'm a big believer that empaths and sensitives have to learn the difference between empathy and guilt. So many of us as sensitives, we're like, oh, but I feel bad for this person, and think that that's empathy. We have to learn how to empathize, to just acknowledge the equalness of, I can see that you are having a feeling and a struggle, and I empathize with that. That must be hard. Is different than taking it on or feeling guilty and bad that it's hard for someone else. Guilt is an emotion that is about doing something wrong. And we carry way too much guilt as highly sensitive people, probably because so many other people in the world don't carry their appropriate guilt for their own wrongdoings in the world, their own missteps and mistakes. So there's a lot that goes in, but the more that you kind of crack it open and just start doing the good work, everything connects to everything else. So there's no way to do this work and just work on one thing. It all connects to everything else. And it gets so much better the more that you hold yourself with integrity and self-respect and work on letting yourself be proud. And when your inner child goes, are you being the narcissist because you're so proud of yourself right now? And you go, no, sweetie, you get to be proud. You just did something really brave and hard, or you spoke up and it was scary to speak up, and I'm proud of you. We just learn how to be there for ourselves in a way that we always deserved.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love that. And I think that is reminds me a lot of just being self-compassionate and just speaking to yourself kindly and being that cheerleader and being that support that I think we all need.
There's a fantastic book and institute. It's got a weird name. It's called Heart Math. Have you ever heard of this?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
There's an institute in, I believe it's North Carolina, maybe it's the other Carolina. They have studied sort of this field of the heart, and they believe that compassion is one of the most healing emotions that we can be in. And when they hook up all the little electrodes to the heart, they're figuring out the energy of the heart. We know that there is a force field around the heart. We don't need science to teach this to us. We feel it when we walk up to each other. That personal space that we take, that's about 3 feet, and we all do it naturally. Why would we all have the same natural amount of separate space between humans? It's because of our heart. We've got this energy from our heartbeat, and it basically says, this is the amount of space. So
Interesting.
yeah, we learn so much. And the more that we give compassion to ourselves, the easier it is to give compassion outward. And that's real healing. If we saw more advocacy coming from the heart instead of coming from the wound, we would feel more heart-centered as people are advocating, instead of feeling that they're spewing anger and vitriol and hatred and hurt from the wound. So there's so much application as we heal. No matter what we're passionate about, we get to advocate more from our healing. And when I talk about my own sexual abuse survivorship, that's often the feedback that I'll get, is that I'm talking about that, but not from the wound. That's what we're looking for. And that's such a better place to live. And when you apply your integrity instead of outward to everything else that you're doing, to actually how you're living and what you deserve. We are all deserved beings. We are all born into this world, precious little babies. And if we tap into that, we get to be more compassionate with ourselves and everybody else. And not just when they're knocking it out of the park with good behavior, but to actually be able to be compassionate with ourselves and others in the face of some of our worst human behavior. When you can do that, that is a confidence in, wow, I have healed so much inside of me. And we will always be healing and growing. But that is a peace. That is how we get to peace. That's what I want for people. That's why I do the show. That's why I'm talking to you now. I want people to be able to feel the peace that I thought I would never be able to feel. And I've learned how to feel it. And so if you're out there and you're struggling, you really, really can learn peace. You can learn calm. You learned anxiety. You weren't born with it. You learned it. And the peace in that is that you can learn something different.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you're doing and the message that you're spreading. And this was a really powerful conversation. So I'm sure that people may want to connect with you further. So how can they connect with you and learn more about you?
Emotionalbadass.com is probably the easiest way to find me. My last name has a lot of vowels and is hard to find. I have my Nikki Eisenhauer website too. If you like how I speak, people go, well, how do I know if I would be good for the boundaries course? If you feel something awakening in you when you hear me speak, if there's some part of you that's like, oh, she has something figured out, the way that I'm talking right now is the way that I teach the boundaries course. And it is just the foundation. And boundaries are not wagging your finger at somebody else telling them what the line is, the way that social media and media kind of wants boundaries to be. Most of the work is inside of ourselves. Most of us have an inner bully that talks a whole lot of shit to us.
Yeah.
So if we can't boundary off that piece, we're going to have a hard time having boundaries with other human beings. So a lot of that work is internal. If you're interested in that, you can come find out more at emotionalbadass.com/boundaries. We start on October 10th. If you want more from me, there's Patreon where you get a big discount to that course. It's patreon.com/emotionalbadass. And if you go to emotionalbadass.com, you can be connected to everything that I do. And it's nice to meet new people. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. And I will leave links to everything you mentioned in the show notes so people can access that. But it was
Awesome.
great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for speaking to me today.
Thank you so much for having me.